to push the button. So welcome to the gallery talk for Nano Imagery, work by Cliff Baker and Susan Napack. These two artists didn't know each other before I threw them together. They still don't know each other. So Susan, this is Cliff. Cliff, this is Susan. I just repeated this because we're recording now. It's going to be a little bit of a short talk due to our Zoom things, but that'll all be fine. I think, how did you experience being thrown together? Cliff.
How did I experience it? As far as I think that it's an interesting comparison of works and different varieties of, as in the term you use, nano, and how many different aspects of art there are.
Mm-hmm. And Susan, did you agree with this being called nano imagery, and because it seems at such a cellular level, the work you are doing?
Yeah, I never thought of it that way before. So I was like, oh, yeah, I guess it can be seen because I'm really honing in on things. And I guess working that small with the little tiny stitches is in itself sort of a nano activity.
Uh-huh.
And just also sort of the way I zoom in on details when doing that in the photographs that I print out and then I stitch on. I could see it. It's not, again, isn't the way, but I always love it when other people see things in my work that I don't see.
Yeah, I think that is, this is a question that actually usually comes much later, but what would you like your audience to see in your work? Susan.
Do you want to tell us who, me? You know what, I don't know. I guess, I mean, I don't even know what I see sometimes. It's, I think I would like them to see something that they can relate to. I don't generally look for any kind of a hook in my work. My work has been called difficult in that there isn't really a hook. It's, you have to really look hard at it and sort of see how you can relate it to what you've seen before, what you've experienced before. So I think everyone brings something different to it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. So what would you say your subject matter is about?
My subject matter, it's primarily informed by nature. I think I've always been photographing nature, looking at nature, and that, that just comes into everything that I do.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, Cliff, your subject matter is sort of very visible. It's drops. Why drops?
Yeah, so it's just an interesting concept, that many people, we really don't think of water or liquid as in small drops, like the size of raindrops, for example. And I think that in using them, those small droplets of water or liquid allows your imagination to go a million different miles, because there are no two drops that collide or land in the same way, similar perhaps, but never identical. And I think what my work does is it lends to using our imaginations and really kind of understanding, that like just a simple drop of water, we really don't think of what it looks like. We just see it happen. But here, in capturing it in milliseconds of time, allows us to see those different shapes and forms that it takes.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned water, but when I look at your pictures, color is such an important part, and it seems more of a excuse me, milky a substance than something so thin as water.
Yeah, so the appearance is, the colors are brought out by the use of either watercolor or like we would use in paint I'm sorry, in cake decorating. I also use acrylic paint to color the water. And I also thicken the water slightly so that it has a consistency that when they collide, you're able to capture that.
Mm-hmm. Does it slow it down?
So in many milliseconds of time, not really. It happens like the water drops when I capture them happen in 1 or 2 milliseconds of time. So
yeah.
it's a now and gone expression of work.
This is what made me think of Nano, because Nano you can't see with your naked eye, and the drops that you photograph, you hardly can register that with your eyes.
Yeah, they
go so fast.
Yeah, they happen in anywhere from maybe 1/5 of a second to maybe 1/4 of a second or faster. Mm-hmm. So it's and I shoot them in the dark using strobes to light them. So it really is just if you imagine just turning on a light switch on and off real quick, that's how fast it happens. But yet our brain, through our eyes, is able to register that image and see what it looks like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you have a physics background, or how did you land on this particular subject matter?
No. So I have been a photographer for many years. I've done a lot of regular photography work like most photographers do, and in photographing people and outdoor landscape photography. And I have some friends that I happened to see was doing some of this type of photography, and it really fascinated me. It takes a lot of calculation to get one image that I would be able to print. May take anywhere from 300 to 600 frames of continuous, one shot after the next, because that's all you get is just that millisecond of time, and then you start over. So it's kind of a little bit of mathematics involved in it, in getting the sequencing all set so that it works properly. And there are days when none of it works and you just scratch your head and go, well, I just wasted 3 hours.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So Susan, you mentioned, and I've seen it, and I hope people will be able to go and see it too, that your starting point is a photograph as well, but in a very different way. Could you tell us a little bit about your process?
Well, I've always sort of started with my work is very process oriented. So it always starts somewhere and then evolves and evolves and evolves and then sort of folds in on each other. So I work in a lot of different medium, but I find that my vision, the thing that really interests me that I can actually find is through photography. So I start there. For these stitched pieces, I printed them on silk. So there are photographs that I have digitally, and I can print them in my inkjet printer on special silk. And then I stitch onto those. So then sometimes, and you can, if you go to my website, you can see that I will do a stitched piece, then I will rephotograph it or scan it, then print it out on gessoed paper and actually work on it as a drawing. And then sometimes I might even take that drawing, if I've changed it a lot, reprint it out on something else and do it in a different medium. So, but it always, I tend to always find my first inspiration through the camera lens.
Mm-hmm. And do you look for specific subject matter, or
Not really, just whatever I see. It's like, oh my God, that's so cool. I have to photograph that. I think I'm probably drawn to certain things. I mean, this grouping of the stitch pieces are, a lot of them are from the coast here in Oregon, from the tide pools and low tide, that I just find really fascinating. I'm pretty new to Oregon, so to have access to that so readily has been really exciting.
Mm-hmm. So one day you thought, oh, let's print this out on silk and stitch on it. How did you get there? I mean, it's not the most obvious thing to do.
I've always done things with my handicrafts with my hands since I've been a little kid. So I used to do embroidery on dungarees and, with rainbows and things when I was a kid. And I thought, as an artist, it might be fun to sort of explore that. So I did a little bit of it a number of years ago. And then I think I've gotten more and more into texture. And I just thought sometimes I would just print the photographs or do them as drawings. And I thought, how can I get sort of more of a textural feeling? And also the activity itself, I do when I'm sitting like in front of the TV at night. Like, I need to do something with my hands. So the small scale of that, I mean, I used to crochet, or I made jewelry, but it seems like that's now the thing that I do with my hands. And I don't know how long that's going to last. I'm having fun with it right now, but it might not last very long. I'm a little restless in terms of keeping with something for a long time. But for right now, it's satisfying.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that you printed it out on silk in your printer. So does the size of the printer, does that influence the size? Well, there's a limit, obviously, but is that a freeing limitation or a limiting limitation?
It's limiting, especially and I a lot of them are in the circular format because I was doing them right in an embroidery hoop, a traditional embroidery hoop, and I sort of liked the idea of that the design would be dictated by the shape. But then I got sort of tired of that and wanted something, so I had to figure out how to stretch the silk on something other than an embroidery hoop, and ended up doing some of the square pieces that are in there, rectangular pieces. But the silk that I have right now is only 8.5 by 11. My printer prints 17 inches wide. So I did get some organza, with like the one with the wishbones that's in the show right now. That's on, I ordered the wrong kind of silk. So it's a more sheer organza, which is interesting, but I haven't found that, or I haven't gotten any of that wider silk, which I could try to get. But for right now, I'm sort of sticking with the small.
So is it especially prepared with a layer of something, or?
It does have a paper backing. It's specifically made to go through the inkjet printer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could imagine what would happen if you would just put in a little piece of silk or organza in there. It's probably mayhem.
I've printed on felt though, on very thin felt. I abuse my printer terribly. And I love it, and it should always stay. working, but I think something as thin as just silk wouldn't work.
Yeah. So, Cliff, speaking of printers and such, how big a role does the way you present your work play in how you envision it?
Yeah, so I think it plays a part, obviously. Most of my work I print on Chromolux aluminum. I like the look of the liquid art on the aluminum. It brings a lot of depth to it. It gives it a very unique presentation, if you will, compared to printing on paper, for example. And I like the depth that mostly that it brings. The color is very deep, and kind of a modern look to it, I guess I would say.
It almost looks like Ektachrome. Was it called Ektachrome? That really intense colored film that no longer is being processed.
Yeah.
We talked briefly about your background, so you were a photographer as always. But you did mention sometimes you go to the studio and nothing happens. But what gets you in the studio? You know, you wake up in the morning, and do you have a routine, or how does that work? It sounds as if it requires a lot of prep.
Yeah, so it does require a lot of prep in just preparing the liquids that I would use that day, and then the type of drops that I plan to shoot, because there essentially are three types of different drops that I do. One is called a crown, where it would be just like a drop of rain coming from the sky, hitting the pavement and splashing. So I do those, and I shoot those on plexiglass where they hit. The other is actually having a pool of water. So just imagine having a pond, and a drop of water coming from the sky hitting in the pond. And when that drop hits, of course, it forms a crater and then comes up and creates a stem. And then the challenge from there is getting that second drop of liquid to hit that stem as it comes up, and to create an impression of some sort that you would capture at that time. And then the third type of water drops that I do are actually called shot from below. We refer to it as SFB in our industry. And that's simply where I have a pressurized mechanism that shoots a drop of liquid from, let's say, your desktop up. And at the same time, there's another drop, 2 drops, or 3 drops potentially coming from up above that would then collide. And that's when then I would capture those.
But in the morning, what gets you in the studio?
Yeah, so that's a good
Plan?
question. So no plan. It's not like you can draw up a plan to go make this particular type of print today. So it's just kind of, more if I'm in the mood, and you have to be, for me, I have to be in the right mindset, because I know that it's going to potentially take me 2, 3, 4 hours past the prep time just to get everything synchronized, set up, the camera shooting properly, capturing these things at the right time. So yeah, I don't have a routine. I mean, it just, some days it happens. Some days I don't go to my studio and work on it. I have I'll call it a regular job outside of photography. And so for me, it's kind of, in a way, I can go to my studio and I can forget about the rest of the world because I'm concentrating on, in this case, my liquid art.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Susan, what does get you into the studio?
Well, with these stitch pieces, I work on them pretty much every day for a few hours in the evening. But as far as the other work that I do in my studio, I tend to work in intense periods. So I'm not one of those artists that have a, practice every day where I go in down the studio and I work down there. My studio is in the basement, that's why I say down. But if I have something that I'm excited about, that I'm working on, or that I know is going to be seen in a show, or I also have a small studio over at the Willamette Heritage Center, and we used to have our quarterly open studio. So if I knew that people were going to come and see the work, I'd get a surge of energy and usually work for an intense period of time on something new that I've already started. Or if something's just really exciting me, then I'll just work on it. But it's sporadic. I've always sort of worked that way, other than when I was in school, and that's all I did. But having a day job, you sort of work. Not that I don't have that right now, but you work when you can. So I think I got used to that kind of a way of working.
Yeah. Both of you mentioned to me that you have other bodies of work than what is being shown in the Corrine Woodman Gallery right now. Could you tell us a little bit about that? I see some of it behind you, maybe?
Yeah, actually, those are some of the newer stitch pieces I have behind me that are, I call them Medusa because that's the word for jellyfish. I had taken a group of photographs in Nova Scotia years ago of these amazing jellyfish and had just printed them as regular straight photographs without doing anything to them. And I think with the COVID-19 just looming over us like crazy, I was not seeking a metaphor, but when I thought about them, they seemed like they could work as an apt metaphor for something that's so potentially deadly and harmful, but also I've been very, interested in just the way the virus looks. Some of it can look very beautiful. But again, very deadly and harmful. So I've been working a bit on these jellyfish and also stitch pieces. But then again, I do have these I've been drawing them as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I have some large drawings, and I've posted them on my website as well, so people could look at those.
So we'll add your website to the Facebook posting. Cliff, I know you have other bodies of work because we briefly mentioned that in our email conversation. Could you tell us a little bit about that? And then we'll move to our last question, and our half hour is over.
Sure, happy to. So I am a product owner for a national company that supplies auto dealers with their aftermarket products. And so I work with a team, our innovation team, on developing new products, creating those products, and putting those products into the hands of our customer, and then of course for their customer.
I was thinking about other bodies of artwork.
Artwork. Oh gosh.
You mentioned that you have other series of photographs.
Yeah, so I do a lot of nature photography, things like that. Just spent 7 days in Eastern Oregon, for example, every day, seeing a new place, new things. So I do a lot of nature photography. I'm fascinated with astrophotography. So that's kind of maybe my second passion, I would say, besides the water drop liquid art stuff. I find that the stars are very fascinating, always changing, and some of the photographs that we can get with the with the universe are pretty cool.
Maybe entirely different end of the spectrum from the little drops to the
Yeah.
sheer endless skies.
Yep. So
interesting.
yeah, stars, the eclipse, we have another one coming up in a few years. Again, very fascinating because of the nature of it and timing involved in photographing something like that.
Yeah. I want to mention to the audience that this show is open through, I have to peek at my calendar, through August 29 is the last day, so make sure you see it. The Art Center is open from Thursday through Saturday afternoon, noon to 5. We ask you to wear a mask. We have about 5 minutes left, and my last question is, if money and space was not an issue for you, what artwork would you like to own? Cliff?
Oh gosh, obviously my own work. So no.
Excellent.
I like a lot of different types of art. I'm not sure that I have one specific piece that I would say that's the one, barring money or resource. But so I don't really have a great answer for you, unfortunately, but yeah.
Yeah, Susan.
Well, you had mentioned this question to me before, so maybe I have a little edge over Cliff on thinking about it. But the thing that came to mind first is the thing that I really, even after thinking about it, there's a piece that no longer exists by an artist, German artist Kurt Schwitters, who created something called Meeresbau, which was a complete environment, sculpted environment. It was from, I think it was, I have the dates here, I even wrote down, 1923 to 1927. I think he did it in Germany, and then I think he fled Germany and then built it again, possibly in Vienna.
He did. And, I don't remember that, but it existed in different places.
Yeah. And it's, I've always sort of fantasized about living in a completely controlled environment like that. And he worked on it, I think, all the time too. It was very geometric, but also very earthy in a way. I used to build room size installations and was very influenced by his work at one time. But I would love to, I don't know if I could live in it all the time, but maybe have one room.
I don't think he lived in it. He had this room that was dedicated to it. Yeah. If you compare to Mondrian, who had controlled his studios very precisely as well, but he used them as living and workspaces. But I think Meeresbau he saw it as an art piece that you could be in, but he wasn't sitting in there having a cup of coffee or anything.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to thank you both for your time, for being artists, for making art and sharing it with us. I would really recommend our people to go and see it. They're both bodies of work that are interesting, and both have according to the time here, we actually have 10 minutes left. Well, then we can talk a little bit more. Let's see. Cliff, you talked about your sky photography. Is that the next development that you're thinking of doing?
I would say it's kind of co-development. So liquid art, for example, is I'm always working to better my output, come up with new, fresh ideas on uh, how those images come about, or how I can change them to make them more exciting or appealing to people. And astrophotography, I've been studying it for a couple years. And, you know, it's just another fascination. I wouldn't say that it, you know, one over the other. Obviously, my liquid art is kind of my trademark, if you will. And I'll continue to play with all the other stuff. It's one great thing about being an artist. You get to play with a lot of different things and determine which ones you like or don't like. And sometimes they go away for a while, but they always come back to haunt you, or you know, encourage you to come back.
Do you feel that you are now typecast as the drop photographer?
You know, much of the art I sell is the liquid art. And so, you know, it's very unique. When people see it, they until you describe how it's made and all, that really fascinates people. Whereas if you go out and shoot a mountain, we all see mountains and we can see them every day. Whereas the liquid art is just completely different.
Yeah, and it still inspires you, and you feel you haven't investigated this to its possibilities.
Yeah, it's endless. I mean, it's endless what you can do with it, and there are so many things that I've visualized, or maybe I've seen elsewhere in the world from people that do the same type of photography. It's very intriguing and challenging.
Mm-hmm. Do you like the challenge?
Yeah, I've always been.
Would you do it without the challenge?
Oh, certainly. You know, certainly I would, but I mean, the challenge adds a lot to it. You know, that sense of accomplishment when you get that one piece that you go, wow, that's it. And it took you, you know, it might take 3 or 4 shooting sessions and 1,000 frames to capture it.
Susan, we talked a little bit about your next body of work, the jellyfish, the Medusa. I thought it was an interesting name that you picked, Medusa, also being a mythical figure of ill-meaning life. But do you also feel that the challenge is something that you enjoy in making artwork?
I like solving puzzles. You know, I do crossword puzzles and things like that. And I'm also a graphic designer by trade, and always thought of it as sort of solving a puzzle. So when I do have a challenge in the work, it's fun. I don't find it, you know, difficult to kind of still stay connected when I have a challenge like that. But I like to play in my studio. So I don't really pose a challenge. I'll more just kind of, you know, make it kind of flow and see what happens. I'm always, I think what generates a lot of my work is that I just want to see what it looks like. Like, oh, what would happen if I did this and put this together with that? So I think if it were too challenging, I might, you know, if I wasn't excited about it, I'd probably let it go. But as long as I'm excited about something, I'll find a way.
Are there, do you have, so when would you decide this is a piece that I'm going to continue with and this is a piece that I'm going to let go because of?
Sometimes I'll just let it go and have it sitting around, and either I'll go back to it. It could be a lot of, you know, a lot of time could pass before I go back to it. And maybe I'll even take it apart and do something different with it. A lot of the, even the thread work, I will do something, I'll do a whole stitched area and then, you know, move on to the rest of the piece and realize that just doesn't work anymore. So I will pull it out and try something else. So, it kind of keeps going. I don't know if I did just rip up a drawing the other day, and I was going to throw it out, and then I looked at the pieces that I ripped, and I thought, well, that's cool. Maybe someday I'll use it for a collage. So I kept it. So there's, it's sometimes just that act of destroying or letting something go for a while can generate something new.
Cliff, you mentioned you have sometimes thousands of frames. How do you select through those, and how do you let go of a particular image?
Yeah, so, the great thing about technology today is we have, many different ways to view it. I use Lightroom, for example, for my initial editing in Photoshop. So I just simply start at the beginning and begin clicking through them, looking for, I don't know, I'll call it unique subject matter, things that are different. There are, of course, when anything collides, there's the before, the beginning, the middle, and the end, and then it's over. And so a lot of those you can just eliminate by where they happen or the lack of anything happening. And I try to narrow them down. Typically, most of my shoots, I would say average between 300 and maybe 500 frames. And then just from there, it's just a matter of, elimination, if you will, until I get down to maybe that final, I don't know, a dozen and then a half a dozen. And, out of all those frames, typically you're going to get maybe 2 or 3 that would be printable pieces.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've really come to the end now. I promise that it's really the end. It's a learning curve for all of us, I tell you. Thank you again for being with us and taking time to talk about your artwork. Again, I recommend people going to see it for real. Susan's work is partly transparent because the silk is so thin. And Cliff has a couple of shiny and a couple of flat pieces, and it's interesting to see the difference between the two of those. Thank you for making artwork. Keep going.
Thank you, Hester.
A lot more.
The pairing is brilliant. I love the way they look together.
Good.
Really
That's what we try to do.
Yeah, thank you.
So
thank you.
I bid you goodbye, and we'll end the meeting here.